Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today I'm going to take you through a whirlwind tour of what we learned about the Pokémon trading card game from the 2016 Pokémon Trading Card Game World Championships. So let's start at the beginning with the obvious, which has been overlooked by a lot of people. Night March was the best deck at the Pokémon Trading Card Game World Championships 2016. Now, if you want to argue with me, that's what the comment section is there for. But we can look at websites, for instance, at CharizardLounge.com. They have amalgamated a whole bunch of statistics, and two things stick out when you look at the statistics involving the decks that top cut the World Championships. First of all, if we look at the top 32 decks, then we can see that the most cut deck, the deck that had the largest share of the top 32, was Night March, which top cut 11 times. The next highest was Bronzong Genesect, with 4. So first of all, there's that. Secondly, you want a different reason? Okay, let's go with number of championship points gained. Night March gained 800 championship points. The next most successful deck, which was Greninja Break, got 380 championship points. Now, bearing in mind, Night March actually had 2 top cuts, both of which were knocked out in top 8, and it still had more than double the amount of championship points as any other deck. That should tell you everything you need to know about Night March. Why didn't Night March win? Well, maybe it was because there were too many other Night Marchers and they took themselves out. Maybe there were too many Night March decks. I'm not entirely sure. What I can tell you is Night March was the best and most successful deck of the tournament. So let's start there, and let's say that with everything else we learned, we thought Night March was the deck to beat going in, and it was. And all the other decks like Greninja, like Mega Aldino, that did do well at the Pokémon World Championships, did well because they beat Night March. Let's go with number 2. Talonflame is a good starter for any slow deck. Now, this was a Pokemon that was released in the most recent set, Steam Siege, and we were all a little bit unsure about Talonflame. Now, the Pokemon World Championships this year were very unique in that they were the very first tournament, the very first weekend, where the new set, Steam Siege, was legal. And everyone had seen Talonflame, nobody knew how good it was. You can have it as a Stage 2, as your starting Pokemon, as long as you have it in your hand to start the game. And it's got free retreat, 130 HP, and an attack that does 40 damage and allows you to search for any 2 cards in your deck. And this was seen in, as far as I can tell, all of the successful Greninja decks at the World Championships. It was played in all the ones that I saw on stream, and it was played in both of the ones that made Top Cut. It was integral to the success of these Greninja decks. Why? Because Greninja is... The downside of Greninja is that it was slower and less consistent than other decks. So you add in Talonflame, you have 130 HP Pokemon, which is hard to KO. It gives you a little bit of breathing room. It might give you an extra turn or 2 before your opponent starts KOing Froakies and Frogadiers. And then, of course, you combine this with the fact that you can search for any 2 cards, meaning that your setup is likely to be helped. Talonflame proved to be very successful indeed. Now, of course, cards like N are in the format, and that's a little bit of a problem. But, you know, these things happen. Obviously, if you use Talonflame's attack and then your opponent plays an N, you lose those cards. But then again, if you've got absolutely nothing and use Talonflame and your opponent ends you, you've still got a different hand, so you might have a better hand than you had before. Now, the Masters Division runner-up, Cody Walensky of the United States, played the maximum amount of Talonflame allowed. He played 4. Bert Walters of the Netherlands played 3 Talonflame. Talonflame, ladies and gentlemen, is legit. And I don't think this is an unusual trend. I think slower decks, which are good when they get set up, but struggle to set up, from now on, I think it's going to be a pretty standard to see Talonflame making an appearance in these decks. Thirdly, Magearna, and yes, I know I got the pronunciation wrong in my Aldino video, Magearna is legit. It is absolutely legit. 3 of the top 8 decks at the World Championships played Magearna. Now, essentially it's a Pokemon, you pop it on your bench, and as long as your Pokemon have metal energy attached, then damage is done, but other effects of the attack are not done, which means a Froakie trying to paralyze you a bubble isn't going to work. A Promo Jirachi trying to get rid of your special energy is not going to work. Shintaro Ito of Japan played this in his Mega Raudino deck. You know what? You've got to play some basic energy. You might as well play metal and get the benefit of Magearna. Sam Ho of the United States played this in his Vileplume Big Basics deck. He was playing Rainbow Energy, which of course does count as a metal energy when it's attached to any Pokemon. And if you're playing Rainbow Energy, you might as well play Magearna. Not only that, of course, but if you're relying on Rainbow Energy, you are worried about the Promo Jirachi discarding it all, Magearna helps very nicely indeed. And then, of course, Gustavo Wada of Brazil used it in his Metal Toolbox deck because, well, why would you not play it in your Metal Toolbox deck? It's a metal deck. Magearna seems to be a card the top players in the world have basically said, look, if you are or can be playing metal energy or rainbow, which counts as metal, then you really do need to be playing Magearna. It's too useful and gives you too much of an advantage. If the only 3 people in top 8 that could have played it did, I think that gives us a fairly clear sign. You aren't going to see this played in a Greninja deck that needs water energy. You're not going to see it played in a Night March deck which has very weak Pokemon that are getting one-hit KO'd anyway. You are not going to see this in a Vespiquen Yveltal deck that has to play basic Dark Energy for Yveltal's Oblivion Wing attack. But in all the decks that could play it, it was played. 4th, nobody knows how to use Ninja Boy at the moment. Ninja Boy is one of the most exciting cards in Steam Siege. In my rundown of the top 10 cards from Steam Siege, if I remember, will put a link in the description of this video. And quite frankly, I said Ninja Boy was one of the very best cards in the set. The potential of Ninja Boy is immense. I've got the wrong basic Pokemon. Oh wait, I can just switch it for the right one. And I get to keep all the energy. And as long as it's been down for a turn, I can evolve it straight after switching. Oh no, I've started with a Shaman and didn't get a turn 1 Froakie. Play a Ninja Boy, and you can immediately evolve up to Frogadier. Oh no, I am attacking with a Genesect and I want to switch into a Cobalion so I only give up 1 prize if he goes down. That's fine. I can play a Ninja Boy. But Ninja Boy, ladies and gentlemen, was not well represented in the top 8 at all. It was in fact so poorly represented that it was only Sam Ho of the United States that actually went ahead and played it at all, and that's because it was central to the idea of his deck. He played a Vileplume deck aiming to stop your opponent playing trainers, and remember that with Forest of Giant Plants, that meant that Sam could get this going on the very first turn of the game before his opponent even had a go to play. And then he played a whole bunch of Pokemon like Jolteon to stop basic Pokemon, Glaceon to stop evolution Pokemon, Aegislash to stop Pokemon that rely on special energy. And he could just, you're trying to attack with an evolution, I'll switch to Glaceon. Oh, you've gone back to basic Pokemon, I will switch to Jolteon. Such an important card, he actually played 2 copies of this, although remember that as it's a Vileplume deck and blocks trainers for both players, or items for both players, he was not playing any Versus Seeker. I don't believe that this means Ninja Boy is bad. I think Ninja Boy will quickly become at least a staple one of in every deck, though I could be wrong. I think what the World Championships taught us about Ninja Boy is that this is a complicated card and we aren't really using it like we have the potential to be, and that we're not quite sure about it yet. And the 5th and by far the most important thing we learned at the World Championships this year is that any metagame can be broken. Or to put it another way, groupthink is dangerous. Now, way I've heard it said before, and I've said this myself, Playing the safe deck gets you into Top Cut. Playing the innovative deck wins the tournament. So you see Night March. Night March that was a safe deck for the World Championships this weekend. It was a deck that everybody knew was good and knew that if it set up, it beat almost anything, even its supposed counter decks, due to its pure speed and consistency. And we saw 2 Night March in the top 8. 11 in the top 32. Oh yeah, and the 9th place person played it as well, and he had the same record as a bunch of people that did cut. He bubbled. Same record, but missed out on resistance. Hey Nick. And the thing is, it's a good deck for cutting. But it didn't win the tournament. What won the tournament? Mega Audino. Why? Because nobody was prepared for it. If you can come up with a deck that beats the rest of the metagame, the other decks being played, the game within a game, then not only do you give yourself good matchups against the board, but you get to sit there in the wonderful position that nobody is gunning for you. Nobody is playing an anti-Mega Audino deck. Now, what they could have done was played something like Zygarde Vileplume, which would presumably have smashed Mega Audino. But nobody was playing that because they didn't expect Mega Audino to be played, let alone good. What Shintaro Ito of Japan did, and did so beautifully well, was found a deck with good matchups. Check out my Audino video, link in the description for more detail, against the entire format, and nobody was gunning for him. And that's why he ended up winning the entire tournament. When he got to play Greninja in the final, I still contend that Audino had a ridiculous Greninja matchup. Faster, taking extra prizes, more consistent, and yeah, 220 HP is hard to take down. Now, don't get me wrong, if Cody, who met him in the final and got second place at Worlds, was expecting Audino, he probably would have done something to his deck to beat it. But he wasn't. So he didn't. What Shintaro taught us, or really reminded us, about the Pokemon trading card game this past weekend, is that people who can come up with genuinely original ideas tend to win the tournament. Now the problem is, we all get into a groupthink scenario. And I'm probably no better than anybody else a lot of the time. What we do is we say, this deck keeps winning, this is the best. And we stop looking through our binders, trying to make the next great deck. And if you keep doing that all the time, keep looking through your binder for the next great deck, you may well end up not cutting as many tournaments. But when you hit like Shintaro hit, you can win the whole thing. Now, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen, there is a comment section. I've given you 5 lessons that we learned from the Pokemon trading card game World Championships, lessons that we can take forward and that you can use to become better players next year. Whoop, whoop. But tell me in the comments if there's anything we learned that I missed, any extra comments, anything else you can think of that I forgot to say. Don't forget to click that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, and if you already have, find a friend to subscribe on your behalf. And of course, by far the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.